NFL rankings 2021, top 20 linebackers. Now, this position, as opposed to the ones I've done previously on defense, especially defensive tackles, is not nearly in the same position as far as talent goes. Now, I will say that I do put a lot more blame on the linebackers for poor defensive plays than I generally do on any defensive lineman. Now, I also give them greater credit when they succeed. I do think what they do is a lot harder. But you will see that I think there's not that many linebackers that really matter, and more what you're looking for in this position is guys who aren't killing you. And that's not what I was talking about here, but I think that is an interesting comparison to like the last positions that I've done. Now, some notes, injuries, not considered. So if a guy like missed last year, whatever, I think it's pretty clearly shown at this point the guys come back from injuries pretty damn well in the modern NFL. Now, if it's like a lingering thing, that's for sure different. But this is for when like fully healthy on the field in 2021, how do I expect them to perform? And it's about who helps you win the most. It's not who's the fastest, who's the smartest, or whatever. It's just who provides the biggest benefit to your team as far as winning the game goes when they're on the field. The killers of the tiers, the order does still matter, and there are no rookies in this list. Once they get to the NFL, we can talk about how good they are. Until then, I don't think there's a whole lot of point in it. So, first five out. Bobby Okereke, Demario Davis, Anthony Walker, Joe Schobert, Danny Trevathan. Now, I do feel, because some of these are pretty big names, I need to kind of explain why these guys are down here on the list. Because, again, as opposed to other positions, these guys are still good. Like, they're not negatives, for sure. But they're not ideal in the modern NFL. So, Bobby Okereke, definitely good. If any of these guys, I could argue for being higher, it might be him. But yeah, my problem with him is kind of similar to guys that didn't quite make this list, which I'll kind of spoil now, guys like Leighton Vander Esch or Jalen Smith on the Cowboys. He just doesn't necessarily do all that much, right? So he doesn't fail very much, but he doesn't actively make plays either, and that kind of only gets you so far just as a player on an NFL field. Again, I talked about that. That's still useful, hence why he's in the top 25, but that's just kind of something I want to mention with him. Demario Davis, still really good as a run defender, is intelligent as a pass defender, but he has physical limitations and can't cover guys one-on-one at this age or really even close, and that presents a pretty big area of attack for opposing offenses. That's why he's down here despite being a bigger name than this. Anthony Walker, yeah, he's pretty good. Again, he kind of falls into that, like, what does he do as opposed to, what does he prevent you from, which is what puts him down here as opposed to other guys. But you're fine with him on the field. Joe Schobert, same as Demario Davis, but reversed. Pretty decent pass defender, but as a run stopper, if he's not in a really positive situation, he can get exposed. We saw that when he was on the Browns the year before he came to the Jaguars, and that's still something I worry about him now. The Jags are getting better, and that's going to allow him to play the way he plays better, but still an issue with him. The last one, Danny Trevathan, almost the same as Demario Davis. Just a little too slow to be a true super impactful guy, but in the top 20, and I do think there's a pretty big tier list between these guys and the next ones. So yeah, Anthony Barr, Zach Cunningham, AJ Johnson. Now these guys all have pretty clear shortcomings. With Anthony Barr, it is partly what the Vikings ask him to do as a pass defender, that which is a similar kind of a theme we're going to talk about with other players later, where that just puts him in really difficult situations more than he should be, and creates more negative plays like on tape than other guys have because they're not doing the same things. But that doesn't mean he does them, right? That's not like a pass. That's just kind of an interesting note as to why, because he still can't do those things, and we know that as opposed to some other guys. And as a run defender, he's good. He's definitely good. He's in the top 20 here for a reason, but he's not elite, and he can be a playmaker at times for sure. He's a pretty good blitzer, pass rusher, but is that skill super valuable? Probably not. So while I do think he's good in a positive, he's not crazy. Zach Cunningham, pretty decent coverage player, better than some guys we're going to talk about here. But some things with that is, one, he's not like he's elite. At that, he's just pretty good. And it's not like, he's going to shut down anybody in one-on-one coverage or anything like that. And as a run defender, he can get washed out pretty easily. He does have some decent range. He's a good athlete, but he doesn't necessarily use that super positively the way the guys ahead of him do. Then we got AJ Johnson, kind of the next step of those bigger, slower inside linebackers who are more run defenders and pass defenders, although he's a little unique in terms of being at least passable, like middle field zone player. But he's really, really good as a run defender. He actually has okay range despite being not super fast. And it's a shame that, he took so long to get to the NFL because he's a pretty decent player out here. Then we got a tier break. And then we have maybe my favorite player, or the one I'm most excited about to talk about in this whole list, Dre Greenlaw. Super, super underrated. He is outstanding. He's been kind of overshadowed by the rise of his partner, Fred Warner, who we'll talk about later, and by the 49ers going through some stuff last year. But as a rookie, when they made the Super Bowl, he was a huge, huge part of the reason that defense was so good. He is a really good player. He can actually cover okay, despite kind of being a little lacking as an athlete. And as a run defender, he does things that matter. And that's going to be kind of everybody from here on out does. But, Drake Greenlaw, don't forget that name. Really good. CJ Mosley, he's been out for a couple of years now. Or I guess it was just last year, right? He was hurt the year before, though. When he's on the field, he actually is pretty similar to a guy like A.J. Johnson, just a little bit better. Can be a little bit of a hole in coverage at times, but he knows what he's doing, and he doesn't have the same lateral limitations that a guy like Demario Davis or Danny Trevathan behind him does. So still good, and also something that is a lot harder to tell, but when you can really tell, you can. He gets defenses and defensive players into the right position, which goes pretty far, and that's what keeps him up here, despite maybe not being as crazy as an individual physical defender as the guys behind him. So then in the same tier, Devin Bush, Jordan Hicks. Devin Bush is another guys like Anthony Barr who is asked to do a lot, and that hurts him because it puts bad plays on tape. But he still can clearly do stuff. And I wouldn't call him like a disaster in coverage. The Steelers defense, he can get asked to cover these gigantic areas that, look, he's a linebacker. You can only expect so much, right? As a run defender, I like him, but I don't love him. He can over-pursue stuff. He's really fast, but that can be a detriment at times. I think he's going to get better at that as he gets older. Sucks, obviously, he tore his ACL last year that he missed some development time, but definitely still a good player, a guy that I would definitely have on my team. Jordan Hicks, another guy that I want to talk about. Jordan Hicks is a positive when he is on the field for your football team. What the Arizona Cardinals are doing right now with trying to trade him and already declaring Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons as starters and middle linebacker is idiotic. It's horrible. If they want to be good, they should not do that. They're doing it anyway. Whatever. But the reason Jordan Hicks is good, right, is because he actually matters more than anyone we've talked about so far, except for maybe Zach Cunningham, as a coverage player, as a middle of the field zone coverage guy. He is actively good. He has really good instincts. I think that gets underrated. He knows what he's doing. He actually has the speed to act on that and matter as a pass defender. Now, he's not crazy. He's not he's not the shutdown guy. No linebackers are, but he's pretty good about it. And as a run defender, he's more than passable. He's just fine. He's not crazy about that, but listen, when he's on the field, he's an active positive for your team. And again, what they're doing, it's wrong. It's wrong. So then we got a tier break again. And now you're into players who are you're losing as we get up these tiers. You are losing weaknesses. KJ Wright, super, super smart player, really good as a run defender. As a pass defender, he's not crazy at this point. He has some good highlights, obviously the pick against the Vikings last year, but he knows where he should be and gets there all the time. He actively limits offenses by being in the correct positions and almost never getting washed out of them. Dante Hightower, actually really similar, more versatile too, which is what keeps him here. Now, both of these guys, again, like I said, not crazy as coverage players at this point in their careers for sure, especially Dante Hightower, but guys who really matter. And like guys I talked about before, the intelligence side of linebackers, getting guys in positions, they're both outstanding at. Devin White, the opposite of those guys. I think the benefit ends up being about a wash rather than the same tier, but you take all the points that those guys have into the mentality and intelligence, and you move them all into athleticism, right? Devin White, I want to talk about his weaknesses first. Still gets misdirected at a almost alarming degree. Now he's definitely getting better at it, but you got to remember, right, that a lot of that weakness was covered up by the defense he was playing in last year, especially as a run guy. If he was in a worse defense, I would get pretty worried really quick. But then I'll talk about and also as like a zone pass defender, you get similar results. Now he makes up for that with being super, super quick to react. But he can just kind of wander into bad spaces with that. But yeah, so his positives, super fast sideline to sideline. When he doesn't get misdirected, when he's just allowed to go and hunt, he destroys plays. He, like I said, reacts really quickly as a zone defender. He actually has the athleticism to keep up with some tight ends that aren't in the top tier, and he does it. And if you're not playing against good quarterbacks who are going to exploit him, then he's going to hurt them as a player who gets all the way around the field really quickly, which is why he got drafted so high, but he's ended up being worth it now. Also, outstanding as a blitzer too. Crazy at that. That's not a crazy valuable skill most of the time because, half the time linebacker blitzers end up being free anyway, but definitely a good player. So then we have another tier break. And again, we're losing negatives. And the negatives we lose here are most of the mental mistakes. What keeps guys like Devin White down below there, Anthony Barr. You're losing a lot of those. Roquan Smith offers a ton of the same positives as Devin White, not to the same extent, but when you lose the negatives of just getting completely out of position, which Roquan Smith rarely ever does, then you end up with a really positive player. Then we got Matt Milano, super underrated player, clearly the best defensive player on the Buffalo Bills outside of their secondary, in their front seven. He's infinitely, ahead of Tremaine Edmonds or Ed Oliver, Jerry Hughes even. Jerry Hughes is pretty good still. But, yeah, Matt Milano actively matters as a linebacker. He matters in coverage. He has the mental ability and physical ability to keep up with even pretty good tight ends. He functions as a zone defender pretty well. He regularly gets in the backfield behind the line of scrimmage to make plays. And overall, you get a really positive player with Matt Milano. Don't forget that name. I think at this point, he's kind of getting bigger, but he was hurt for part of last year. It's really good. Then we have Jamie Collins, number 8. Really similar, actually. Although he's more of a zone pass defender than I think Matt Milano is. If he's in the middle of your defense, you're not going to get killed there, ever. Right now, he's not perfect for sure, especially at this age. His athleticism is not quite what it once was back when he was, an all-defense player. But he's still really good. He's clearly very smart if you watch the way he moves around the field. Being on bad Lions teams made his impact go way down because, you can only fight so many fires, right? But Jamie Collins still really good. Then Miles Jack. Miles Jack moved away back to off-ball linebacker as opposed to being the Mike in the Jaguars defense when Joe Schobert came around, and that difference really showed. Because when you put him in the position that these other guys like Devin White are allowed to have where they're more reacting and kind of going crazy, he's really, really, really good at it. Better than everyone we've talked about so far, really. And he is the best coverage linebacker we've talked about. Bart, especially in man coverage, it's not even kind of close. As a zone defender, he can get lost a little bit sometimes, but Miles Jack, super, super good. Now, he does still have, as opposed to the other guys on this list, more mental mistakes for sure. He can still get out of position. Being in a bad defense, at least the last couple of years, has shown up some of his weaknesses for sure. But when you let him do the things that he should be doing, you get a borderline elite linebacker, and that's why he's all the way up here. Number 6, Deion Jones. So the results of Deion Jones are kind of the same as Miles Jack, but how it happens is different, right? Deion Jones is the best coverage linebacker that we've talked about. I just said that about Miles Jack. We'll take that even a step up with Deion Jones. I think he is, outside the guy we're going to talk about a little bit later, the best zone coverage linebacker. What does him in and keeps him out of these top couple tiers is his run defense. He's pretty there mentally, and he gets in good positions. He's just, as opposed to all these other guys, he's just bad at it, right? He doesn't have the physicality to handle up blockers. He doesn't get around blocks very well generally, although he can beat some slower linemen at times. But yeah, you get a player of extremes here. I think everybody knows about Deion Jones at this point, but super good, super good coverage player. Almost bad run defender, but that's still a really valuable skill set in modern NFL. That's why he's so high. Number 5, Latte David, doesn't do things wrong and combines that with the ability to make plays in and around the line of scrimmage in a way that matters and being able to cover guys to a meaningful degree. He's not perfect, especially at this age, but still really good. And now we're getting into the top 4. Now, this might be a little controversial, but I think it's interesting, and I can definitely defend it. So, number 4, Darius Leonard. Still in the same tier as Latte David, but he is really good, obviously, and he absolutely deserves to be this high, but I think there are going to be people who think he should be higher and should be lower. He is not, I think, quite the coverage player that he's cracked up to be. The Colts play the super simplistic zone defense that, while good, obviously, it's had really good results, puts players in positions to succeed very easily. Now, again, I'm not going to roast him for that. All I'm going to say is that you see when those defenses kind of put him into tougher positions that other players are in more consistently, he does not deal with it as well as his reputation would suggest. Again, especially as a pass defender, when he's not playing these simple, short, react zones, it gets hit or miss. Now, he has some highlights that are way up there. He's still good. Listen, he's in the second tier here, but he's not quite to that level. As a run defender, he's awesome for sure, 100%. I have very few problems with him outside of him being a little bit too aggressive at times, but that's not really, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's going to lead to more positives than it does negatives. So then the last in the same tier, number 3, Eric Kendricks. Eric Kendricks, right, he is Deion Jones without the weakness to the run. That's kind of, yeah. And I do think that pretty clearly puts him ahead of Darius Leonard. They're in the same tier. Like I said, they're really close. But Eric Kendricks, the best. Well, I keep saying the best with this because linebackers are kind of unique with this in that they're all just a little bit separate from one another in the way they do it. But, yeah, Eric Kendricks is a middle-of-the-field coverage linebacker, even in complicated scenarios, because you see the ones that, like I talked about Anthony Barr at the beginning of the video, the ones that put him in positions where he doesn't succeed. Eric Kendricks gets put in those spots and then still succeeds anyway, as well as consistently affecting a gigantic area of the field as a pass defender in the middle. And that's huge, especially the way the modern NFL attacks that area of the field. Super, super valuable. And he's actually a plus as a run defender. He's not great. Otherwise, he'd be in the top tier, but really good. And now, another player I'm really excited about, into the top tier, Fred Warner. The dude is crazy. He's like, the way I'll describe him, right, is he has all of the positive that I literally just talked about that Eric Kendricks is a pass defender, all of them, combined with, 5% more speed and like 10% better as a run defender. And that leads to a super elite player who is constantly mattering on every snap of the ball. Especially, again, I can't talk about his pass defense enough positively. He's so good about it. He almost never makes mistakes. He actively, he plays the ball even really well, which is something a lot of linebackers struggle with. With Fred Warner, you get a great player. And the other guy in the top tier, Bobby Wagner, still the best as far as I'm concerned. And this is where that mental thing I talked about with guys like C.J. Mosley, stuff like that pops up again. The Seahawks defense should be so much worse than it is, like you saw in the second half of last season. Because really, given their talent, it should be like the first half when they were getting smoked by every piece of opposition. But then Bobby Wagner, you saw clear changes in the way they played defense, the way he was calling their defense. He figured it out, and they turned into like a top 10 defense for the last 8 weeks. That should have been, frankly, impossible given their talent. But Bobby Wagner is the reason. He is the smartest defender in the NFL at this point. I think pretty clearly. He just I talk about him in positive light for ages. The only weaknesses I'd say at this point is I do think he has lost a step from, because he used to be this freak athlete, the way that Fred Warner is really now, maybe even better. But I do think he's lost it a little bit, and he's more into the only elite, which keeps him at number 1. Still amazing. and a gigantic positive for the Seahawks. So, yeah, that's the top 20 linebackers. Like I said, his position not as strong. I think you kind of need to get into the top 10 before you're talking about, like, constant positives. Although these top 5 guys are outstanding. You're good. You're doing all right if you got them. But, yeah, top 20 linebackers NFL 2021.